I made my daughter the CEO of my company when she turned 23. 6 months later, she fired her elder brother, my first son, from the finance manager position and made her husband the new finance boss. When I questioned her, she said I had no right to question her decisions. What happened next was rather unexpected. I will tell you everything. First, let me quickly thank you for your continuous support. This means a lot to us. If you enjoy the stories we share, kindly subscribe to this channel. It will be great if you can leave a comment on which city you are watching from. We might just give you a shout out in our next story. Today's special shout out goes to John Freeman from Ohio. We are glad you enjoy our stories. Now let's go deeper into the story. I built the company from scratch, every brick, every contract, every sleepless night. It started in our garage when Ava was just a toddler, wobbling on uncertain legs while I crunched numbers by lamplight. I used to tell myself it was all for them, Ava and Marcus, for their futures, for their stability, so they wouldn't have to carry the weight I carried. My wife left before the money ever came, said she didn't marry me to become second to spreadsheets. So I raised them alone, me and the company, the two loves of my life. By the time Ava turned 23, the company had grown into a formidable name. Our books were clean, our reputation sterling, and though Marcus, 5 years older, had been loyal, he never showed the hunger Ava did. She was fire and steel, calculated ambition hidden behind a calm, polished smile. From age 17, she shadowed me to meetings, pitched ideas that sometimes made my board pause. I thought, she's got it. That rare, ruthless spark. I saw myself in her, and maybe that's why I handed her the keys. I remember the day vividly. It was a bright Thursday morning. I stood before the board, chest tight with pride, announcing my official retirement as CEO. The applause felt genuine. Then I said, I'm appointing Ava Marston as the next Chief Executive Officer. A hush fell, followed by scattered claps, then full applause again. Marcus smiled, tight and forced, but said nothing. He was already finance manager by then, a role he handled diligently but without flair. I should have noticed the way he looked at her. Not admiration. Something quieter. Wounded, maybe. But I ignored it. That evening, we held a dinner at a private room in Langston's downtown. White linen, crystal glasses, laughter. Ava toasted me with her new title, voice full of promise. To Dad, she said, lifting her glass. For building an empire and having the courage to pass it down. I won't let you down. I smiled, unaware that the knife would come from the hand holding that glass. For the next few weeks, I watched her settle into her role like a seasoned chess master. She made sweeping changes, refined the marketing team, brought in younger advisors, streamlined some overhead processes. I stayed in the background as promised. I wanted her to lead without a shadow looming behind her. Marcus kept his head down, doing what he always did, numbers, projections, managing accounts. He never confronted her, never asked questions. But something shifted by month 4. Ava became colder, harder to reach. Her emails stopped CCing me. Board meetings were closed door. When I asked for updates, she deflected with polished excuses. You said you were retired, Dad, she'd remind me. Let me lead. I forced myself to trust her. That was my choice. My mistake. Then, out of nowhere, Marcus showed up at my home on a rainy Tuesday evening, soaked, eyes red. He said just one sentence before collapsing into the armchair. She fired me. I blinked, thinking I misheard him. She what? She fired me. No warning. No write-up. Said she wanted someone more aligned with her vision. I stared at him, stunned. What did you do? Nothing, he said, voice cracking. I did nothing wrong. And Dad? He looked up, face tight with disbelief. She hired Connor, her husband, as my replacement. I felt like the room was tilting. Connor was fresh off a failed startup, arrogant and reckless with finances. I never liked him, but Ava was in love, and I'd made peace with that. But to hand in the financial reins of a company I built? Over Marcus? I drove straight to headquarters the next morning and demanded a meeting with Ava. She welcomed me into her office like nothing had happened, all calm smiles and spreadsheets. Dad, she said, I didn't expect you to come in. I didn't sit. You fired your brother and replaced him with your husband. What the hell are you doing? Her face didn't flinch. I'm doing what's best for the company. With Connor? He's aligned with the direction I want to take. Marcus wasn't. You think that justifies firing your own blood? She leaned back, folding her arms. I'm the CEO. You appointed me. This is my company now. A sharp silence followed. My heart pounded. Don't forget who owns the majority shares. She smiled, calm, icy. Don't forget you stepped down. You gave me this job. You don't get to micromanage me now. That moment, her eyes, the chill in her voice, was when something inside me began to unravel. I realized I hadn't created a leader. I had created a tyrant. One wearing my last name like armor, swinging it like a sword. I left without saying another word, hands shaking, mouth dry. I drove home and poured myself a drink I hadn't touched in years. Then I opened the drawer where I kept all the paperwork, the contract, the terms, the succession plan. And there it was, a clause I'd buried in the fine print out of caution. A single line that said I retained the right to revoke CEO status under conduct unbecoming or detrimental to organizational harmony. It wasn't much, but it was enough. I sat there until midnight, staring at that paper, trying to understand where I went wrong. Did I fail as a father? Or was she simply never the person I thought she was? I didn't know the answer, but I knew what I had to do next. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat in my study, staring at the contract, replaying her voice over and over. This is my company now. I kept thinking about Marcus. The way he stood in my living room, rainwater soaking into the carpet, his eyes so stunned you'd think a stranger had fired him. But it wasn't a stranger. It was his own sister. And that made all the difference. I raised them to lean on each other, to protect one another if I wasn't around. And yet here we were, one using her power to exile the other. For what? Ambition? Loyalty to her husband? I didn't know yet, but I was going to find out. By 7 a.m., I was dressed and halfway to my lawyer's office downtown. James Fulton had been with me for over 20 years, ever since the company was just me, a leased office, and a vision. He didn't ask questions when I walked in unannounced and dropped the contract on his desk. He just read the clause I'd highlighted and looked up with a slow, careful nod. She breached nothing legally, he said, but ethically, morally. This clause gives you leverage. It won't be pretty, though. I don't want pretty, I replied. I want my son's dignity restored. James leaned back, hands folded. You sure you want to go nuclear, Charles? She's your daughter. I didn't answer immediately. I looked out the window behind him, the skyline sharp and gray, the streets pulsing with people who didn't know their families were imploding over spreadsheets and pride. She drew the line, I finally said. Now I'm just stepping over it. We spent the next hour drafting the termination notice, cross-referencing every legal line with the company bylaws. I would be exercising my right as the principal shareholder to revoke Ava's CEO title, effective immediately. The new interim CEO? Marcus. James hesitated at that part. Are you sure he's ready? He was always ready, I said. He just never fought for it. By noon, the documents were signed and sealed. James would email them to Ava first thing in the morning. I told him I'd handle the call myself, not to soften the blow, but because she needed to hear it from the man who trusted her, and now no longer could. That evening, Marcus came over again. I handed him a drink and told him to sit down. He looked better than yesterday, less stunned, more steady, but still confused. I'm reinstating you, I said, setting the papers down between us. As CEO. He blinked, mouth parting slightly. What? I wrote a clause in Ava's contract. I never expected I'd use it, but I exhaled. She's made this personal, and she brought her husband into our bloodline business. You've earned the position. Now it's yours. He didn't touch the papers. She'll never forgive you. Maybe not, but she'll understand. One day, there was silence between us for a while. He finally whispered, She used to worship you, Dad. I know, I said. I used to worship her too. The next morning, it was done. James sent the formal email at 9:01 a.m. sharp. Ava was in the middle of her weekly executive meeting when she opened it, or so I heard later from someone in the room. She read the subject line, immediate termination of CEO authority, and went pale. Then she stood up, slammed her laptop shut, and walked out without saying a word. The board was stunned. Her assistant cried. Connor didn't show up at all. She called me within the hour. Dad. Her voice was shaking, but not from sadness. From rage. You fired me? You're joking, right? No, I said calmly. I'm dead serious. You can't do that. I'm the CEO, You were the CEO until you fired your own brother and installed your husband like we're running a family monarchy. This isn't a sandbox, Ava. It's a corporation. You abused your power. She went quiet for a second. Then she exploded. You're just jealous I did what you never had the guts to. Make tough calls. That wasn't a tough call. That was a betrayal. Of who? Marcus? He's dead weight. Always has been. Don't speak about your brother like that. My tone shifted. Firm. Final. You're out. Effective immediately. Company car will be returned by end of day. The penthouse lease is under corporate name. You'll vacate by Friday. She was crying now. I could hear it. But still she snapped. You said this was mine. You gave it to me. And I took it back, I said. Because you didn't know how to honor it. Click. She hung up. I didn't move for a long while. Just sat there, listening to the empty tone ringing in my ear. Part of me hoped she'd call back, say something, anything, to prove I hadn't raised a tyrant. But she didn't. Not then. Later that afternoon, I drove down to the office with Marcus. He didn't wear a suit, just slacks and a collared shirt, sleeves rolled, nervous energy oozing from every pore. I walked him to the CEO's office myself. Her name had already been scraped off the glass. I looked at him and said, "Don't make me regret this." He nodded once. "I won't." The board welcomed him back with quiet nods and reserved claps. No one said Ava's name aloud, but I could feel it hanging in the halls like smoke, everyone wondering how a family dynasty turned into civil war. I didn't have an answer. All I knew was that power doesn't reveal people. It exposes what's been buried all along. And in Ava's case, it unearthed something I never saw coming. The next morning, I woke up to silence. No emails. No missed calls. Just the strange stillness of a home that once buzzed with Ava's voice, her ideas, her ambition. I sat in my kitchen staring into a cup of black coffee, untouched, steam curling like ghosts above the rim. The air was thick with something I hadn't felt in years, regret. Not for what I'd done, but for how far things had fallen. I had envisioned a family legacy, a smooth transition. Instead, I had kicked my daughter out of her throne, stripped her of her title, her apartment, and her pride. And yet, there was no other way. I could feel the judgment of the world inching closer. The board, our clients, our relatives, but none of it cut deeper than knowing I had failed her. Or maybe she had failed me first. By noon, Marcus had fully assumed his new role. He moved into the CEO office with hesitant steps, unsure whether to celebrate or mourn. I stood beside him, watching as he set down a photo of the two of us from years ago. Him holding a trophy from a school math contest, me beaming with pride. "You've earned this," I told him. He gave me a small nod, but I could see the conflict in his eyes. He wasn't like Ava. Power didn't come naturally to him. It sat on his shoulders like borrowed weight. "I never wanted it like this," he said softly, glancing at the nameplate that now read Marcus Marston, CEO. "I know," I replied. Neither did I. By 3 p.m. The HR department received Ava's formal response to the termination letter. It wasn't a counteroffer or request for mediation. It was a legal notice of inquiry. She wanted clarity on the clause I used to terminate her. She wasn't going down without a fight. I met with our legal team immediately. "She's digging for weakness," James said, probably hoping to frame this as wrongful termination under duress or nepotism. I smirked, though nothing about it felt funny. Nepotism is how she got the job in the first place. She might argue that you're punishing her for exercising independent judgment as CEO. "Then I'll show them her judgment," I said, tossing a file onto the table. Inside were documents I'd quietly gathered, questionable vendor contracts she signed, inflated consulting payments approved by Connor, and a canceled partnership deal that lost us a major client. She didn't just cross the line. She danced on it. James raised an eyebrow. "You planning to go public with this?" "No. I'm not out to ruin her. Just to stop her." But by the end of the day, it was too late. News of Ava's sudden removal leaked. Someone from the board, probably. Or maybe a disgruntled executive who'd sided with her. The headlines started rolling in. CEO ousted by father. Family business erupts in internal coup. Daughter replaced by older brother in shock decision. I didn't even flinch. I'd survived worse storms. But it was Marcus who looked pale reading those lines. He knew what they'd say. online, in whispers, in private messages. That he got the job not because he deserved it, but because he was the loyal son, the safe one. I walked into his office just before sunset and handed him a statement I drafted myself. Release this to the press. Make it clear you were appointed based on a unanimous board vote and due diligence. No mention of Ava. He looked it over, then said quietly, "You're protecting her." "No," I said. "I'm protecting you. If we drag her name through the mud, this company goes with it. Let her burn out on her own." That night, Ava called me again. Her voice was calm, eerily calm. "You humiliated me," she said. "I removed you. In front of the whole world, Dad. You did that yourself when you fired Marcus without a shred of cause." There was a long pause on the line. Then she said, "I didn't think you'd actually do it. I thought you'd be angry, sure, but I figured I could talk you down. You thought you could manipulate me." She exhaled. "No, I thought you were my father. And you thought that meant I wouldn't hold you accountable?" She didn't answer. "Actions have consequences, Ava," I continued, my voice firmer now. "You were handed a crown. You turned it into a weapon. I made bold decisions. No, you made reckless ones. You don't know what it's like," she snapped. "To be young, to be watched constantly, to have every move criticized because I'm your daughter. I needed someone in my corner. Connor was the only one who backed me. And you repaid that loyalty by gutting your brother's career." She was quiet again. Then, with more vulnerability than I'd heard in months, she asked, "Where am I supposed to go now?" The question hung there between us like fog. She was living out of a friend's guest room. Connor's reputation had soured fast. He was being investigated for mishandling vendor payments. She had no apartment, no title, no vehicle. Just her name, and the bitter taste of consequences. I didn't answer her question. I simply said, "You'll figure it out. Maybe this is the first real thing you've ever had to build on your own." Then I hung up. After that call, I sat in the dark for a long while. I thought about when she was a little girl, how she used to sit on my lap and say, "One day I'll be your boss." I used to laugh and say, "Good. Then I can finally relax." Now, the laugh caught in my throat. Marcus called later that night. "She texted me," he said. "Didn't say sorry. Just asked if I was happy now." "What did you say?" "Nothing. That's probably for the best." But even in silence, pain lingers. And this one would take time to bleed out. It had been 5 days since I fired Ava, and already the air around the office felt different. Not cleaner, just quieter. Like the tension that once wrapped itself around the building's walls had slipped out through the vents, leaving behind an eerie sort of stillness. Marcus was settling into the role with the kind of focus I hadn't seen from him before. Not flashy, not loud, just consistent. I'd catch glimpses of him standing in my old conference room, sleeves rolled up, reviewing reports himself, talking to junior staff without a hint of arrogance. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. He was trying to prove to himself, maybe, that he belonged. Still, I couldn't ignore the whispers. They trickled in from every corner of the company. "Did you hear she's staying at a friend's? I saw her at the coffee shop down the street. She looked rough. Connor might be getting sued." The worst came from someone in HR. She called last night to ask if we'd give her a character reference for another job. That one hit me harder than I expected. Ava, the girl who once carried herself like the heir to an empire, now asking for favors from people she once ordered around. It was hard to picture her like that, and harder still to feel the kind of satisfaction I thought I would. If anything, it made my stomach twist. Then, on the 6th night, she called again. I almost didn't pick up. I stared at her name blinking on the screen, Ava, my thumb hovering over the green button. Something told me this wouldn't be like the other calls. And I was right. She sounded different this time. No sharp edges, no venom. Just exhaustion. "Dad," she said quietly. "I'm here. I'm sorry." It wasn't loud or dramatic. It just fell out of her mouth like something too heavy to carry any longer. I didn't speak right away. Not because I didn't want to, but because I didn't know how. I'd waited years to hear my daughter admit she was wrong about anything. And now that she had, it didn't feel victorious. It felt sad. "I messed up," she continued. "I thought I could. I don't know. Be like you. You were never supposed to be like me," I said gently. "You were supposed to be better." I was scared, she confessed. Connor was pushing me to make big moves, and I felt like everyone was waiting for me to fail. every decision I made. I just kept thinking, what would Dad do? I leaned back in my chair, eyes closed. I wouldn't have fired my own brother. I know that now. Her voice cracked, just slightly. He hates me. He's hurt. There's a difference. There was a pause. Then she said something I wasn't expecting. I don't want the company back. I blinked. What? I don't want it. Not anymore. I don't even know if I want to be in business. I've been staying in Leah's spare room, applying to jobs that I'm not even sure I want. I feel like everything I thought I was good at just slipped away. I ran my fingers through my hair. It was tempting in that moment to say something soft, to offer comfort, to tell her that she'd find her way, that she was still brilliant, still worthy. But I didn't, because she wasn't calling for comfort. She was calling for truth. Sometimes losing everything is the only way to figure out what matters, I said. You thought the power was the prize, but it wasn't. The prize was trust, and you broke it. I know, she whispered. I just wanted to hear you say it. I didn't hang up. Not this time. We sat on the phone for another 10 minutes, not saying much, just letting the silence speak for us. When the call ended, I didn't feel relief. I felt grief. Not for what had happened, but for what might never heal. The next morning, Denise stopped by. She'd been our HR director for nearly 15 years before retiring 2 years ago. A good friend. Honest, sharp. She came by with coffee and that familiar look of someone who was about to say something uncomfortable. She called me, Denise said, setting the coffee down. Ava. I didn't act surprised. What did she say? She asked me if I thought she could fix this. I looked at her. And what did you tell her? That she can't fix the company part. That door is closed. But I told her she could still fix you, if you let her. I stayed quiet. Denise gave me a long look. Charles, you did what had to be done. But don't confuse justice with closure. They're not the same. I shook my head. She's not ready. Maybe not. But you are. Later that afternoon, Marcus found me in the break room. He was holding a box of old files Ava had left behind, business cards, and used notepads, a half-empty bottle of perfume. She didn't even come to clean out her office, he said. She's ashamed, I replied. He nodded. She should be. You don't hate her? I asked carefully. He paused, looking down at the box. I want to, but I think I just miss her. I didn't say anything. I just took the box from him and told him to get back to work. He left quietly. I sat there, staring at the bottle of perfume, and remembered when Ava was 8 years old, running through the office in sneakers too big for her feet, pretending to sign contracts with a crayon. So much had changed. So much had burned. And yet, some part of me, deep down, still hoped she'd find a way to come back from the ashes. But hope wasn't enough. Not this time. It didn't take long for the vultures to start circling. The first article had been civil, even vaguely respectful. Just a business update posted on a mid-tier finance blog. But once Ava's name hit social media, it ignited something uglier. The headlines got bolder. The comments got nastier. Daddy's girl dethroned. Nepotism bites back. Fired by her father, can Ava Marston recover? I read every one of them even though I told myself not to. They painted her as a spoiled heiress, a corporate brat who let her husband run the show while she reaped the benefits. Not all of it was wrong. But most of it missed the truth, that she had once believed in this company, believed in me. That her fall was not just professional. It was personal, and it had my fingerprints all over it. The family came next. It started with a phone call from my sister Irene, who lived 3 states away and hadn't visited in over a year. Her voice dripped with passive concern. Charles, I just saw the news. What in God's name happened? You really fired your own daughter. Irene, I don't owe you. She's family, Charles. You don't humiliate family in public. What were you thinking? I kept my voice measured. I was thinking about the company. About Marcus. About protecting what I built. You didn't protect anything, she snapped. You lit it all on fire. I hung up on her. She followed up with a text. You'll regret this when you're alone and old. That one stung, not because I believed it, but because I had feared it. I built everything for my children. I poured 30 years of my life into this business, hoping it would bind us, not break us. But the irony was thick. The more I tried to leave behind a legacy, the more I watched it rip us apart. Even my cousin Elaine, who hadn't so much as liked one of Ava's posts in 3 years, started weighing in. She's so young. She wrote in a group message to half the family. She made a mistake. That doesn't mean she should be cast out like some criminal. As if I hadn't agonized over the decision. As if I hadn't already counted every piece of wreckage it left behind. And then came the voicemail. It was 3 minutes and 16 seconds long, sent at 11:41 p.m., when most sober minds should be asleep. Ava's voice wavered from pleading to bitter to outright furious. I didn't play it the first night, just stared at the notification like it was a loaded gun. But curiosity, or maybe guilt, won out the next day. "Dad," she began, already teetering on the edge. "I know you won't pick up. I don't even know why I'm doing this. But you need to hear me. You didn't just fire me. You erased me. You wiped me off the walls, off the website, off every piece of paper like I never mattered. And I get it. You're angry. You think I betrayed Marcus. But you didn't see the pressure I was under. You didn't see the way people looked at me. Like I didn't earn any of it. Like I was a placeholder until you changed your mind. I tried to be decisive. I tried to take control. Maybe I went too far. Fine. But did you ever stop to ask yourself why?" I closed my eyes as her voice cracked, raw now. "I did it because I didn't want to be seen as weak. I was afraid, okay? Afraid of failing. Afraid of disappointing you. And yeah, I leaned on Connor too much. I made the wrong calls. But I didn't expect you to take everything. You could have pulled me aside. You could have guided me. But instead, you dropped the hammer. And now everyone sees me as the joke. The failure. The woman who wasn't strong enough to be you." The voicemail ended in silence. No apology. No demand. Just pain. I sat there for a long time, phone pressed to my ear long after the message ended. The thing about Ava, about both my children, really, is that they were never just my legacy. They were my mirror. And what I saw in Ava now wasn't just defiance or arrogance. It was a reflection of my own brutality, handed down in a more fragile vessel. That evening, Marcus and I grabbed dinner at a quiet bistro a few blocks from the office. He looked tired, bags under his eyes, tie slightly loosened. But he looked older too, more grounded. "She left me another message," I said. He didn't look surprised. What did she say? That she was scared. That she didn't want to fail me. Marcus stirred his drink. "She did fail you. But I don't think she knows how to separate failing the job from failing the family. She said she doesn't want the company back. She shouldn't have it back. That doesn't mean she doesn't want you back." I studied my son for a long moment. "Do you?" "Do I what?" "Want her back." He didn't answer right away. Finally, he said, "I want the version of her who used to sneak gummy bears into board meetings and whisper strategy ideas like we were spies. I want the sister who used to wake me up at 3 a.m. with business pitch ideas and actually listen to my feedback. That version. Yeah, I want her back. But I don't think she exists anymore." His words settled into my chest like dust on a shelf that hadn't been touched in years. The next day, I found myself back in Ava's empty office. Her perfume still lingered faintly on the chair. Her handwriting was on a sticky note still stuck to the monitor. "Remember, be sharper than the doubt." I stared at that note for so long I almost forgot what I came in for. I gathered her remaining belongings, what few there were, and had them boxed up, not shipped. Just stored in the office's lower archive room, where the company's early history was kept. It wasn't an olive branch, but it wasn't an erasure either. Maybe, someday, she'd come back for them. And maybe, by then, we'd both be ready. It had been almost 3 months since I removed Ava from the company, and the noise had finally died down. The headlines moved on. The investors calmed. The board stabilized. And Marcus, well, Marcus found his rhythm. He was never meant to be flashy, never meant to dazzle. But he was steady, decisive when it counted, and above all, fair. People respected that. Quiet power always commanded more than the loud kind, even if it took longer to get noticed. I saw him most days, usually hunched over reports, sleeves rolled up, hair a mess from running his hands through it too many times. He didn't talk about Ava much. I didn't either. We both carried her like a splinter in the back of our minds. Small, sharp, and not quite ready to work its way out. Some nights, though, I'd catch myself wondering where she was, what she was doing, if she was okay. I didn't ask around. I could have. I had enough connections to track her every move. But I didn't. I told myself it was about boundaries, about preserving the hard line I'd drawn. But the truth was more complicated. I didn't want to know if she was struggling, and I didn't want to know if she was thriving. Either outcome hurt. Then, one afternoon in late spring, I drove past a tiny co-working space on the east side of town, the kind of place startups and freelancers use when they're trying to get something off the ground. And there she was, Ava, sitting near the window, laptop open, a paper cup of coffee next to her, her hair tied back in a messy bun. She looked normal, not like a fallen CEO, not like a disgraced name, just a young woman trying to figure it out. I didn't stop. I didn't honk or go inside. I just watched her for a few moments through the windshield and drove on. I didn't even know why I was in that neighborhood. Maybe some part of me had known she'd be there. That night, I told Marcus what I saw. She looked okay, I said, focused, like she was starting something. He nodded. That's good. Do you think she hates me? Marcus thought about it. No. I think she hates herself too much to hate anyone else right now. I nodded slowly. That's worse in some ways. He looked at me. Do you regret it? I didn't answer right away. I wanted to say no. I wanted to stand tall in the decision I made and never look back. But truth isn't always that clean. Finally, I said, I regret what led to it, not what I did. He accepted that, maybe even respected it. 2 weeks later, Ava showed up at my house. She didn't call first, didn't text, just rang the bell like it was any other day. I opened the door, and there she was, slightly thinner, older somehow in the eyes, but still Ava. She held a manila envelope in one hand and a bottle of wine in the other. I didn't invite her in right away. We stood there in silence for what felt like a full minute. I'm not here to make things right, she said, because I don't think I can. I just wanted to return the company credit card and say thank you for everything, even the hard part. She handed me the envelope and the wine. I took both. You doing okay? I asked. She shrugged. I'm surviving. Starting something new? I'm trying. Nothing big. Just building something slowly. Good. She nodded, glanced at the house behind me like it was unfamiliar. Anyway, she said, turning to leave. I should go. Wait, I said. You want to come in? She paused, looked at the door, then back at me. Not yet. I understood. She walked down the steps and out of view. I didn't follow. I closed the door, placed the envelope on my desk, and set the wine aside. I didn't open the envelope until the next morning. Inside was the card, a handwritten note, and a photo from her first day as CEO, us standing beside each other, her beaming, me proud. On the back, she'd written, I'm sorry I forgot what this was supposed to mean. That day, I went into work and said nothing. No one asked, but I kept the photo in my drawer, not to remember the fall, but to remember the hope that came before it. There's a kind of silence that isn't about punishment. It's about healing. It's about saying, we don't have to talk right now. We just have to try again when we're ready. I don't know what Ava and I will be in 5 years. Maybe we'll rebuild. Maybe not. But I do know this. I gave her a throne, and she turned it into a lesson. And sometimes, that's what children do. They teach you, through failure, through friction, through fire, what it means to let go, even when it breaks your heart. Sometimes, the hardest part of being a parent isn't watching your child fail. It's knowing when to let them. If you've ever had to choose between love and boundaries, you understand the weight of this story. Tell me in the comments, would you have done the same? Or would you have forgiven her sooner? See you soon in the next story.